G'day, I'm Stephen Berveling from Sydney, Australia, and I'm with Team for HIV Hope. And you are with the OhioRAAM Show. Enjoy!
Well, how cool is that? This episode of the OhioRAAM Show was introduced by a barrister who lives in Australia, Steve Berveling, and our guest on today's show is a barrister, well, we call them lawyers here in the United States, who lives in Ohio, Steve Magas, who's known as the Bicycle Lawyer. And this show, as always, is brought to you by the wonderful workers at the Race Across America time stations 41 and 42 in Blanchester, Ohio, and Oxford, Ohio, the first two time stations in Ohio, where they're open 24 hours a day during the race, and where we have 24-hour fuel, 24-hour food, and 24-hour fans. If you're a veteran fan of RAAM or just learning about the race, these two time stations are a great place to take in the race, which takes place in mid-June each year. And we'll be there in 2016. When we get close to the race, we'll have more details about how you can enjoy the race from these two time stations. And hello, I'm the host of the OhioRAAM Show, Lee Kreider. Been doing this show now, we're well into our fourth year. And this is show number 105. And you wonder about the hat. Well, I just feel my Celtic instincts coming out in today. Well, that's not quite true. I need a haircut, and I just thought this hat would cover it up a little bit. So we're going to travel on down to Cincinnati and visit Steve in his offices there. Enjoy the show. Well, here with Steve Magas.
Magas, yes.
Who known as the bike lawyer. And I've heard about you for a long time. It's the first time I've had a chance to see you
well, it's nice
face
to meet
face.
you.
Nice to meet you. Tell me a little about yourself, Steve, and how you came to be the bike lawyer.
Well, that was actually kind of interesting. I was a young lawyer, probably in my 20s at that point, in the 80s.
Uh-huh.
I was riding bikes. I was never a racer, and it didn't come from that big cycling background, but I got in the cycle club doing rides, and there's a blurb in the cycle club newsletter, and it says, "Help, we need some legal help." And long story short, as a nonprofit, you have to file a piece of paper with the state every 5 years, let them know you're still in existence. They didn't do that for 25 years, and so their charter had lapsed. And I didn't do that kind of law, but I looked it up and figured out, okay, we got to get the Cincinnati Motorcycle Club to sign off on a form that says it's okay for us to continue using the Cincinnati Cycle Club name. Okay. So I had to go to this bar on the west side of town, a biker bar called Stormy's, and it's one of those bars where all the Harleys are lined up, in the front, and it says no colors on the door. And I didn't know what that meant. I later found out that meant no gang colors to be displayed in the bars. And I had to track this guy down, butcher, whatever, and he signed off on the form, and we kept the cycle club alive because the cycle club here was born in 1880. So we wanted to keep that name. I didn't want to lose it. So I did that. And then I started writing a few pieces for the bike club newsletter. And then those got picked up by Bike Ohio. And then I got a few bike cases, and I got kind of a bigger, very sad case, wrongful death case. And then that got me some more cases, and then I started doing them. I've done almost 400 bike cases by this point, so quite a few.
Now, is that a major part of your practice, or? Now
it is. In 2009, I'd worked for other firms and things over the years, but in 2009 I went out on my own, started my own practice, and was looking to do general litigation, bicycles, motorcycles, and now 5-6 years later, probably 85% of my practice is bicycles. Okay. So it's all mostly crashes that occur in the state of Ohio, cars, dogs. I've had a couple products liability cases, and then some things that are sort of associated with bicycling. So I work with the Cincinnati Cycle Club, I work with Queen City Bike, I work on the Ohio Bicycle Federation things. I've provided some free legal advice to rides and providing them with waivers, going over risk and liability issues with mountain bike clubs and that kind of thing. So but almost all of my stuff now relates to cycling in some way.
Well, can you relate? Tell us a typical kind of case that you get. I know you can't get into personal details, but something that...
Yeah, they run the gamut from, your typical cyclist coming towards him, car makes a left turn, whacks the cyclist. The typical injuries from that can run the gamut from a hip bruising and scratches to hip fractures, clavicle fractures, surgeries, head injuries, and my cases run the gamut from kind of minor to crazy, wild cases to wrongful death and very serious bodily injury cases. So, and they occur throughout Ohio, and I take cases throughout Ohio. I also get called into cases in other states from time to time when I try to find someone in those states to work with. And
so you practice exclusively in Ohio?
Yeah, I'm not licensed in other states, but because we're so close to Kentucky and Indiana and people read my stuff, I get calls from there, so I track down lawyers in those states to work with, and then we work the cases together. I had a case, now this was a whole nother file cabinet worth of material, but I had a case in Kentucky involving a woman who was a single mom commuting to work every day from Nicholsville straight up, I think it's Route 28 into Lexington, and she got tickets for dangerous driving. And the thing that she did that was dangerous was to ride in the lane of travel with lights on during the daytime, day glow vest, and using every possible safety precaution. They charged her with dangerous driving, and I ended up as her trial lawyer in the traffic case. We tried the case for an entire day down in Nicholsville, Kentucky. Now, for that, I was admitted what's called pro hoc vice, which is for the purpose of one case. You can ask a court, you can't set up shop down there without being licensed, but you can ask the court for special consideration for a particular case, and the court let me do that.
I don't know why, but it seems to me I remember hearing something about that. Was that on your website?
It was on the website. It was all over the media and the cycling advocacy, because it was a huge issue. This woman was trying to do everything that someone who tries to ride as a driver would want to do. You'd not hug the white line, not ride on the berm in these roads, but be in the lane, enough in the lane to be conspicuous and visible. And she was, because the problem, quote unquote, was that the other drivers were calling in to report this crazy lady was actually riding her bicycle, in the right lane.
And to work.
To work,
and it's probably her means of transportation.
Absolutely, yeah. She didn't have a license, and she had to get to work. She had two children to support, and she was 18 miles 18 miles one way, so 36 miles a day on the bike going to work and back. So yeah, she's hardcore.
Yeah, well, I saw something recently, I think it was on your Facebook page, about this issue of riding as far to the right as practicable. That's kind of an indefinite.
It's a weird thing. It's really a remnant from days past, and when wagons and things like that were on the road. We'd love to see the law say, everybody gets to use the lane, and if you want to pass someone, you change lanes to pass. But that's not what we have. In virtually every state, the law says something similar. You have to ride as near to the right side as practicable. In Ohio, that word practicable is not defined. And so in 2006, the board of the Ohio Bicycle Federation got together, and we drafted a set of changes to Ohio law. And one of the changes we developed was what I call the C section, which is 4511.55C, and it adds to this practicable, and it provides a number of situations where you do not have to ride at the right side of the road, including if the lane is too narrow, if there's parked cars. And we tried to incorporate kind of a definition or a concept of reasonable and safe. And those are the 2 points that I've made for 25 years, 30 years arguing these cases, that you have to pick a place to ride that's reasonable and safe. And if you can justify your lane position in that way, I think then you win whatever ticket. Now, somebody got a ticket up in Lakewood, Ohio, and that was brought to my attention, and I had written some things, I think, on how to try those cases and put that up on the Facebook page. So people are always kind of startled we can get a ticket for that.
You mentioned some law changes. What are there other laws that you would like to see changed, or laws you'd like to see improved, or?
Yeah, we have been trying to get a 3-foot law passed in Ohio for a few years now. That has a little more traction this year than it's had in the past years, and we're hoping to get that passed. Right now, when you read the passing law, it says you have to pass at a safe distance. That's the buzzword. And if a Humvee is passing a Jeep, maybe 6 inches is safe. I don't know, but when a Humvee is passing a bicycle, 6 inches is not safe. The bicycle rider is exposed. There's wind variables that can be shoved around. There's potholes and debris that the Humvee is going to run over, and the bicyclist has to move. So we're trying to get this 3-foot law passed to allow a cushion around the cyclist to give some protection. Now, some people argue 3 foot isn't enough. Some people want, let's change lanes to pass. 3 foot has been sort of an accepted distance in many states. Ohio's not the most progressive state in the legislature right now in terms of passing these things. So we thought, well, here's something that's been passed in 25 other states. That gives us some points to argue.
We just had Chuck Smith on the show about 10 days ago.
Right.
And he, of course, talked to us a lot about the laws, and we'll have some information on our website if you go to OhioRAAMshow.com on how you, as those of you from Ohio, can get in touch with your legislature, so forth. But as I told you, about 30% of our audience comes from outside the United States, another 30% outside of Ohio. But these kind of cases are universal.
Oh, absolutely. They happen throughout the country. Crashes happen. What I handle primarily are the civil cases that come up, and basically you're looking for money damages to compensate someone. But these other issues relating to how is a bike supposed to behave in traffic comes up more and more often, particularly when we start adding all of these infrastructure changes. We have bike lanes. Well, do you have to use a bike lane? Well, the answer in some states is yes, you do have to use a bike lane. If some states have a mandatory side path law, where if there's a sidewalk, you have to use that instead of the road. Ohio doesn't have that at this point, so even if there's a bike lane there, you don't technically have to use it. You might get screamed at, but
It runs in my mind that there's some cooperation between states as to traffic laws. That they have some degree of similarity.
The basic rules of the road don't change dramatically from state to state, but this bicycle area is something that even under Ohio law, cities and municipalities are allowed to regulate the operation of bicycles on the roads. And then one of the changes we made in 2006 was they're allowed to regulate them so long as local laws are not fundamentally inconsistent with state law. That's the phrase that we wrote into the law. So let's say on Beachmont Avenue out here, maybe the city passes a law that says, because we think this road is so busy, you're not allowed to use it. Well, under state law, that doesn't fly, and that would be inconsistent with state law, which says you're allowed to use roads like Beachmont. So the city could pass it, they could try to enforce it, we could try to fight it, and then sometimes things happen that way. Up in Bay Village, Ohio, just this week, a number of emails are circulating because they used to have some of the worst bike laws in the state. In the last year or so, the city council has upgraded their bike laws to become consistent with state law in almost all categories except this 2 abreast. And they have, I don't remember what the roads are, but on this road during these times you have to ride single file. And their position legally is that as a charter city, we have the right under the home rule provisions of the Constitution to do this. Nobody wants to get into a constitutional law battle with a city over a traffic law. And so till they can try to find a way to sort of massage city council to get them to change that, that's going to be the rule. But there are cities that have local laws that are in conflict with state law. And I had a case with one fellow was riding in Pickerington, gets rear-ended, serious injuries, brain injuries, and I get the police report. He's rear-ended, and so it's like a slam dunk, no-brainer. I get the police report, and the police report says it was his fault because he was riding on the road in contrary to city law that says because there's a sidewalk there, he had to use the sidewalk. And it's like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. So I was able to call the city attorney, have a conversation with him about this home rule, and do you really mean, because that was a case where if we had to file a challenge, that case, because of the size of the case, I would have done it in a heartbeat. It wasn't a $20 traffic ticket. This was the rest of this guy's life. And so the city attorney agreed they didn't want to do that. They had the police report changed to reflect the fact that the city law was inconsistent with state law and that it wasn't his fault. It was actually the driver's fault that hit him from behind. So, these things come up not daily but regularly when cities try to do things that differ from state law.
Okay, we're back here with Steve Magas, the Ohio bike lawyer. We want to talk a little bit about something that's dear to the heart of every cyclist. Now, I have to say by preface, I am a dog lover. One of my hobbies is photographing dogs. I've done 3 books of dog photos. So all you dog lovers out there, don't get mad at us. But all you cyclists who happen to be dog lovers know very well that dogs can be a problem.
They can, and often, unfortunately, the owners, more so in the country than the city, I think, the owners don't realize what a hazard even a playful dog can be. I've probably done 50, 60, 75 dog cases. I've done maybe 5 or 10 where the dog actually bites the cyclist. Normally the dog is coming out, maybe they're chasing, maybe they're being aggressive or not, they hit the bike, or the front wheel gets spun and the rider goes over the top. The rider brakes and goes over the top, and I've had some where I had one where a Saint Bernard came out as a rider was going downhill and clobbered the rider broadside. So these are regular occurrences. The dog laws in Ohio are some of the best in the country, in my opinion, because it puts the entire responsibility for the incident on the dog owner's responsibility. There's no comparative negligence or assumption of the risk or these other defenses that can come up in some car crashes don't apply to dogs. If the dog comes on the road, and as long as you weren't teasing or tormenting the dog, that's the defense. So Ohio dog laws put the onus on the owner of the dog to keep the dog away from the road. If the dog comes on the road and leaves the owner's property, then you win. And if you get hurt, you win the standard types of damages that you would win in any injury case. Your pain and suffering, wage loss, medical bills, and that kind of thing. So from my perspective as the person representing the cyclist, these are good cases because it's a slam dunk on the liability side. Sorry.
Go ahead, take care of your throat.
Yeah,
I had to take a breathing treatment before we started here. So, well,
and then so the dog laws changed a few years ago, and the dogs can be categorized as dangerous or vicious if they have prior incidents with the dog. And in those types of cases, you can win additional damages from the homeowner, and the homeowner is supposed to have special insurance if the dog gets categorized like that. The dog wardens in Ohio have a duty to investigate these things. Sometimes we have trouble, but as I was saying before, it seems like the best riding roads out in the country seem to be the ones where the country dogs are let to roam free. They don't put them up, keep them too much tied up.
Well, I was telling you during the break, I used to live about 15, 20 miles to the east here, and you're getting in the borderline of a little more rural countryside, and we had a lot of dog problems there. But the only time I was bitten once, but that wasn't there. That was up in the northern part of the state. And as it turned out, the dog had just been released from quarantine.
Oh, boy.
A few days before he attacked me, and he got me in the leg, and I had to have stitches in the front and back. And as it turned out, the owners of the dog had nothing, and no insurance, no nothing. I mean, there was no recovery possible. The dog warden did sadly have to put the dog down after the quarantine from the bite it gave me. But so I've been there, and I think most cyclists have. If they haven't been bitten, they've had some close calls. It's just one of those things. The other thing we talked about at the break was road rage.
Road rage has really been, it's always been an issue. I mean, I'm sure in the 1890s, people screamed at cyclists. They're called the scorchers, I guess, back then, who would kind of ride willy-nilly through town and make everybody angry, and particularly the horse-drawn carriage folks. Today, we have the same mentality, except that it's more aimed at people who routinely use the roads, not as a scorcher zipping around, but just as a part of traffic. And people get mad and angry, and they all have a story. These cyclists, they never follow the law, or they run the stop signs and whatever. And then that when they see one that's in their way, you see these explosive moments happen. I have a case pending in Columbus right now, where a lawyer of all things went on a bit of a road rage against a cyclist. This was seen by a third party who I represent, who is an emergency room doctor. The doctor thought the cyclist was going to be killed because the way the motorist was going after him, and the motorist passed him, stopped, and then there was a collision at that point, and then the motorist got out and started berating the cyclist, after the ER doc made sure everybody was okay, he started filming because he was so shocked at what was going on. And the motorist tried to come after him and was swiping at the camera. And then the guy got in his car, started to drive away. And they think everything's fine. All of a sudden, the guy turns around and comes back at him, tackles the doc, knocks the camera out, steps on it, takes it, says he's confiscating it as evidence, and then walks away. And he's now being charged with a couple of crimes, these are no convictions at this point, but we're keeping an eye on that case. And then I'm representing the doctor who was attacked by this guy in the civil case. But this is not uncommon, unfortunately. It all started when there was an obstruction on the road. The motorist had to stop. The cyclist was scooching up past everybody on the right. The motorist then aims his car trying to pinch off the cyclist, but he got through. After the obstruction clears, then the motorist chases the guy down, and then the whole brouhaha sort of ensued.
But, I didn't mean to chuckle at it. It's not
serious
business, but
it's just the whole image of the thing.
I mean, again, if you've ridden at all, you've been a subject to road rage of some sort, a bottle thrown at you, or curse words, or something.
And words are one thing, and whatever. But when it becomes physical, I think the motorist who is enraged forgets that the cyclist is from a matter of physics, is kind of wobbling up there on two skinny little dots of rubber that are attached to the road. So if you get a little knock by the car, any part of the car, it could be catastrophic. And they don't realize that.
I have become angry as a cyclist. I think most of us have, but I've tried to manage my anger. I've said my goal now is to make love, not war. And if somebody honks or gives me the finger, I just act like, there's an old friend,
Right, yeah.
And it helps me feel better. I don't get all boiled up about it,
Yeah.
And
there's no sense in engaging.
It's just a better way to go at it. And on a bicycle, there's not much you can do about it.
No, I had a case a couple of years ago, Tony Patrick down in Chesapeake, Ohio. And Tony is a good rider, a strong rider. Used to ride with a group, like the Tuesday night group or whatever, that rode out of a bike shop, and they would, cross the river in Huntington and zip around Southwest Ohio and then go back to the bike shop and have a beer probably. But he was riding with a kid who was 16, I think, and they had both ridden 100 miles a day before, so they weren't really ready for the race of the Tuesday night ride. So they got dropped by their guys, and they're kind of straggling in late. And a cop who is sitting on this is a 25-mile-an-hour, 2-lane country road leading into town, a small town. Cop sitting at the library yells at him to get off the road. And Tony says, "I got as much right to be here as you do." Well, that set off a chain then. The cop then comes out with the car, goes up next to him, and they're jawing back and forth, which escalates in terms of its tone and vulgarity, and then the cop decides he's going to move them off the road. So he starts moving the car over, splitting the two up, and Tony's in front and the kid is behind him. The cop slams his brakes on. The kid kind of bunny hops around it, and the door opens, and he bunny hops around that, and then the two riders keep going. Well, now the cop's really mad. Lights and siren, zooming by him, does the 45-degree turn, Hawaii 5-0 style in the middle of the road, comes out with his taser drawn. And Tony rides up, he gets off, he starts moving towards the parking lot, bam, the guy shoots him with the taser.
Wow.
And at that point, fortunately for Tony, the taser barbs, if you know anything about tasers, they have to kind of stick, and then the current comes in. Well, they weren't stuck. And the cop you can hear him, zapping, but nothing was happening to Tony. And so then he comes after Tony, and Tony's, they're all in their kits, and he's got his cleats, and so he's kind of dancing around with the bike, trying to hold off the cop. And Tony's description was the cop had one hand on his pants, trying to hold him up while he was coming at him with the baton, and then another cop comes around behind him and shoots him in the back with the taser. He goes up, and then bam, hits the pavement. And from my research, he was the only taser victim in history to hit the ground with a helmet on. So his helmet hit the ground, and there's nothing you can do. I don't know if you've ever seen or been tased or seen people who've been tased, but once it hits, you're cooked. There's nothing you can do, and so you just crumble. And he was then arrested, charged with numerous crimes, including several felonies. The kid was also charged. They both had to hire counsel. Tony's lawyer from Huntington, I think, came over in Ohio and practiced and got the charges dismissed on a motion that they filed. The key point being, the judge said he was allowed to ride on the road. He wasn't doing anything wrong. There's no evidence that he was doing anything wrong. The cop said they were riding two abreast and traffic was backing up behind them, and the judge said they're allowed to ride two abreast, and if traffic backs up behind them, that's what the law envisions, and then that's why you pass them safely. And I ended up filing a lawsuit in federal court here in Cincinnati, where we sued the two police officers and their departments and the county sheriff, and we had just a lot of fun in that until we settled it.
What raises a question? How cooperative, astute, educated, I don't know what the right words are the enforcement officers out there about bicycles and bicycle laws? Is that probably runs the range from
0 to 100%. I mean, there are very bike-friendly officers. There are very bike-unfriendly officers who don't feel you should be out there at all. Right here on Beachmont Avenue, we have 4 lanes of travel. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a 4-lane sort of commercial street in a suburban area. Stores and things all up and down. Now we have a little 3-foot berm painted off to the right that has the sewers, the debris, and all of that. I've got a guy who works at the bike shop up here who rides in the lane because on his $7,000 racing bike, he doesn't want to ride through the glass and the rocks and all that, and he goes at a pretty good clip. He's 3 or 4 times have had the sheriff tell him to scoot over, and it's like that's not a lane that you are ordering him off the road. B, that's not a bike lane certainly, and so we have. I've communicated with some other folks I know in the sheriff's office, trying to do things quietly to do some education. But yeah, it really runs the gamut, and it depends on how irritated the cop is at the situation and how what your attitude and approach is can play a big role in that.
A city here, many miles from here in Ohio, where a local municipal policeman who had sort of a reputation in town pulled over a couple of my friends in the club, only to find out, and give them the business, only to find out they happened to both be state patrolmen. and this caused for a little consternation all the way around.
Absolutely.
Those kind of things happen. Steve, you practice in Ohio, but you tell me that let's say somebody wanted to get in touch of a lawyer. He lives in Oklahoma. Could you help him find somebody there? Or
absolutely. Yeah. No, I communicate with. We have a small number of folks that do this sort of thing regularly around the country, and a lot of us are in communication with each other on issues that come up. And then, so I often get calls or emails. Somebody reads something on my website and then says, "Hey, does this apply here?" And I say, "Well, I don't know, but I can get you to somebody." In general, I've been pretty successful in finding lawyers in other states, and I've been called into cases in a number of different jurisdictions and by the injured party, and then managed to find counsel in Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, or wherever, and work out the case. So it works out.
As a cyclist, how ought we to be prepared? What ought we to do if there is an incident of some kind or an accident? Give us some general advice in these things.
Yeah, I put a kind of top 10 list on my website a couple of months ago on things to do. And it's hard because if you're injured in a wreck and you're by yourself, you're kind of at somebody else's mercy. Perfect example, I have a client right now who was wearing a camera at the time of the crash, like a GoPro. He was hit from behind. It wasn't a huge crash, but he got knocked to the ground. His head hit the ground. He gets up. He's looking around. He's walking. He's talking. He's answering questions, responding to people, responding to the medics. He has no memory of that whatsoever. He doesn't know why he said the things he did. And so even when you think someone is okay and they're telling you they're okay, they may not be. So step one is to get the ambulance and get the EMTs and get the police to the scene. That's always got to be step one. And hopefully your injuries are not so severe that you can't do that yourself. But hopefully that's the first step, that if you're unconscious, that's what someone does, obviously. Step two is listen to those people and get checked out. Most cyclists that I know who ride a lot are very hardcore, pull themselves up by the bootstraps. They get knocked off, they want to get on the bike and go. And that's generally, jokingly, the first question, that everyone asks, is my bike okay?
That's right.
And I saw a T-shirt that popped up on my feed. It's upside down and it says, "Is my bike okay?" So you can look at it and know what to ask them. But do those types of things. And then after that, if you're okay to look around, if it's a dog incident, you want to find the dog. If you want to find the owners, you want to get an address of. Nowadays with the cell phones, you can do everything on your cell phone. You can take a picture, you can draw the map, you can type in data or whatever, and that's what we were talking earlier about the app that we developed.
I will have on the show notes right below the video a link to Steve's website and some other things we'll talk about here in a minute, and that'll be on the OhioRAAMshow.com website. If you're watching this on YouTube or one of the other sites that embed the show, you will have to get those links. You'd have to go to OhioRAAMshow.com and scroll down to find Steve's video, and they will be there. Now, you have an app.
I do. I got an app. Yeah,
everybody's got an app.
It seems like it. There's a couple bike lawyers around the country who have an app, and I modeled mine after a fellow in New York City, primarily because I called him and said, "Hey, that's really cool. How do you do that?" And he said, "Well, here's the name of my app developer." And so I used the same app developer, but we looked at a lot of different ways to do it. And on the app there is a section of Ohio law, and you can go to the app and pull up Ohio law, and you can scroll through and read about every bike-related Ohio traffic law, as well as my inane commentary on some of it. But I try to put my own commentary underneath each one of the statutes. That's one part. The other part is the actual crash app. And what I did was I took the data that I use that I want to get from a person, and I said, here's how you can enter that yourself. And so there's a page for entering information about a motorist. There's a page for entering information about witnesses. The GPS component, if you click that, it'll pinpoint the GPS location of your crash. There's a part of the app allows you to find a local bike shop or taxi and hospital, and then part of it takes, when you take pictures using part of it, it stores them. If you could take videos, you can take recorded statements, and the nice thing about the app is it stores it all together. You click one button and it emails the entire package to me, so you don't have to do this piecemeal. And it provides an easy way to kind of keep all the information you would want about a crash in one location.
Now, if I'm out of state and I use this app, it come to you, then I could access it and you'd send it on to whomever.
I would, yeah, and I would communicate. It comes into me as an email, so I'd email back, get more details, and then find someone in that state that could help out. But again, it's nothing specific to Ohio in the data collection. It's the same data you would collect if you had crashed in Alaska or Montana or New Hampshire.
And again, on the website below the video, you will see links to those apps, and I see you've got both the iOS, the Macintosh, Apple version, and an Android, haven't you?
The Android is on there, but it's sort of under construction right now. So we have some. I don't know the technical side of that, but they're trying to make it work with the new operating system or whatever. But the Apple side works very well. I can tell you that.
Well, Chuck Stiver, who's our cameraman here, videographer, he's an Apple guy, so that may please him. That's the way to go.
Oh, I'm all Mac in my office anymore now, so it works out.
Well, I'm dragging my feet behind yet, Chuck. I appreciate the time you've taken. Is there anything else that you'd like to cover before we wrap this whole thing up?
Boy, that's a huge question. There's a lot of things, but we don't really have time. But this whole concept of being aware as a cyclist that you are an advocate. Every time you go out on the road, I used to call you're dubbed a bicycle ambassador every time you go out, and the way you should operate your bike the way you operate any other vehicle on the road. I tell people, once you cross the white line, you're in the big game, and you've got to play by the rules, and you should play by the rules. You can get a ticket for any infraction on a bike that you can get in a car. You can get drunk driving, you can get stop sign violations, and you should behave as a motor vehicle operator. Too many times, it seems to me, I see cyclists acting on the road as though they're on a Sunday afternoon jaunt through the bike path. And I was in Columbus recently, and I got a guy with headphones with a cup of coffee, and he's steering his bike through the cars that are stopped in traffic, off the road to go through the crosswalk to get around the red light, back on the road. And there were 48 different traffic violations in a 2-minute observation. I mean,
and that doesn't do cyclists any good. It's not a good idea.
And it's dangerous to the rider, but it also, from a global perspective, it's part of that. I often joke that there's a meter that measures our reputation, and every time somebody does that, it kind of clicks down a little bit. And when you do positive things and you interact positively and you communicate with the other motorists,
it takes a lot of positive to make up for one negative.
That's true, because every motorist has that story. Oh, I saw that cyclist run a red light.
And they're all like that.
Yep.
Well, Steve, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for coming
a whole
along.
lot and coming with us. And we hope that people will enjoy learning a little more about bicycles and the law.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, that's our show for today. The OhioRAAM show comes to you 3 times a month on the 7th, the 17th, and the 27th of each month. However, there will be no show on November the 17th. We'll be preparing for our holidays, our Thanksgiving holidays, as here in the United States at that time. So we're going to take a little hiatus and a little breather for that. We thank you all for your support of the show. At every time you like or share or retweet the show on your social media, you help spread the word for this wonderful sport of cycling and ultracycling. On our website, you'll see an archive of all the 104 previous shows we've done. You'll see a place to leave your email so you can get notifications of new shows. No one else will get that email. We keep that to ourselves. And you'll find a place where you can leave your comments or if you have a message for us of any kind, we appreciate that. We always enjoy your thoughts, even your criticisms. That's helpful as well. You'll find a list of future shows and other information about the OhioRAAM show and ultracycling right there on the website. With that, we say goodbye once again until November 27th, when we're going to have ultracyclist Kelsey Reagan with us, and we will look forward to seeing her on the show. Bye-bye.